It is January 9th, 2007 in San Francisco. The Moscone Center is packed. The lights go down, and Steve Jobs walks onto the stage in his black turtleneck. He tells the audience he's going to introduce 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. The crowd cheers. Then he repeats it: an iPod, a phone, an internet communicator. And then he says the words that will change the world. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. On a massive screen behind him, a picture appears. It is a phone with no buttons, just a giant slab of shining glass. The audience goes berserk. It is pure magic. 3,000 miles away in Waterloo, Ontario, in the headquarters of Research in Motion, the company that makes the BlackBerry, the executives are watching a live stream of the event. They are not cheering. They are laughing. One executive points at the screen and says no one will ever want to type on a piece of glass. Another one says it is a toy. The battery won't last past lunch. They look at the iPhone and they do not see a threat. They see a joke. This is Alex from the Untold path, where the rise and fall of legendary companies reveals how power shifts, markets change, and giants crumble overnight. To understand why they laughed, we have to understand who they were. Before 2007, BlackBerry was not just a phone. It was a status symbol. It was the Excalibur of the corporate world. If you wore a suit, you had a BlackBerry on your belt. It was called the Crackberry because people were addicted to the little red blinking light that told them they had a new email. At its peak, BlackBerry controlled over 50% of the smartphone market in the United States. It was used by the president. It was used by every CEO on Wall Street. It was used by Madonna and Kim Kardashian. It was the device that ran the world. The company was led by 2 men who were the perfect team. Mike Lazaridis was the brilliant, obsessive engineer. He was the Wozniak. He cared about physics and bandwidth and battery life. Jim Balsillie was the aggressive, shark-like salesman. He was the Jobs. He cared about market share and crushing the competition. Together they had built an empire on a simple premise. People need email. And the best way to do email is with a physical keyboard that goes click, click, click. They had perfected it. Their phones were incredibly efficient. They sipped data. They lasted for days on a single charge. Their network was secure enough for the Pentagon. They felt invincible. So when Steve Jobs walked onto that stage with his slab of glass, they didn't just see a competitor product. They saw an offense to their religion. Mike Lazaridis looked at the iPhone from an engineer's perspective, and he decided it was impossible. He said the processor was too powerful. It would drain the battery in an hour. He said the full web browser would crash the AT&T cellular network. He genuinely believed that Apple was lying, that the demo was faked. He thought it was a beautiful and practical toy that would never work in the real world of business. Jim Balsillie looked at it from a salesman's perspective and dismissed it because it didn't have a keyboard. He believed that serious people needed to type. Teenagers might want to play with a touchscreen, but the corporate warriors, who were the backbone of BlackBerry's business, would never give up their physical keys. They were so convinced of this that they didn't even bother to have a strategy meeting about the iPhone for months after it launched. This was not stupidity. These were very smart men. This was something much more dangerous. This was cognitive dissonance. They had spent a decade building a worldview where the keyboard was king, where efficiency was paramount, and where security was everything. The iPhone violated all of those rules. To accept that the iPhone was the future, they would have to admit that everything they believed was wrong. And they were not ready to do that. So they doubled down. They ignored the iPhone and focused on making their keyboards even better. They launched the BlackBerry Bold, which was a beautiful piece of hardware if you lived in 2005. It had a leather back and a gleaming silver frame, and the best keyboard they had ever made. And, for a moment, it worked. BlackBerry's sales kept growing through 2008 and 2009. The momentum of their past success was carrying them forward. But under the surface, the ground was shifting. The iPhone wasn't just a phone without a keyboard. It was a computer in your pocket. And then, in 2008, Apple launched the App Store. Suddenly, the phone wasn't defined by what Apple put on it. It was defined by what the world put on it. Games, social media, productivity tools. The phone became a platform. BlackBerry had no answer for this. Their operating system was old and clunky. It wasn't designed for apps. It was designed for email. While the world was playing Angry Birds and scrolling through Instagram, BlackBerry users were still just checking their inbox. By 2010, the laughter in Waterloo had stopped. The iPhone was a massive hit, and now Google had entered the game with Android copying Apple's touchscreen model and flooding the market with cheaper devices. The pincer movement had begun. Mike Lazaridis finally realized they had to do something. They had to make a touchscreen phone. But instead of rethinking their entire philosophy, they tried to force their old worldview onto the new technology. They created the BlackBerry Storm. It was a touchscreen phone, but because Lazaridis was obsessed with the tactile feel of a keyboard, the screen itself was a giant physical button. To type a letter, you had to press down on the glass until the entire screen clicked. It was a disaster. The mechanism was faulty. The screens broke. The software was buggy. Verizon, their biggest partner, had to replace almost every single Storm they sold. It was one of the biggest product failures in tech history. It was a physical manifestation of a company fighting against reality. They were trying to make a touchscreen act like a keyboard. After the Storm, the panic set in. The executives started infighting. They tried to build a new operating system from scratch, but it was too late. They tried to launch a tablet called the Playbook, but it launched without an email client, which was the only thing BlackBerry was known for. The numbers started to crash. In 2009, BlackBerry's global market share was 20%. 5 years later, it was less than 1%. The collapse was breathtaking. It was like watching a skyscraper implode in slow motion. The company that had once been worth $80 billion was now being parted out for scrap. Jim Balsillie resigned. Then Mike Lazaridis resigned. The dynamic duo, who had built the empire, were gone, leaving behind a smoking ruin. The tragic irony of BlackBerry is that they were right about many things. They were right that physical keyboards are better for typing than glass. They were right that their network was more secure. They were right that their battery life was superior. But none of that mattered. They were fighting a war on functional grounds, while Apple was fighting a war on emotional grounds. People didn't buy the iPhone because it was a better email machine. They bought it because it was magic. They bought it because it was a window into a new world of apps and internet and connection. BlackBerry was selling a tool. Apple was selling an experience. The error that killed BlackBerry was not a technical one. They had the best engineers in the world. It was a psychological one. They loved their own creation too much. They were so in love with the physical keyboard, with the clicking sound, with the red blinking light, that they couldn't see that the customer's taste had changed. They believed that they got to dictate what the market wanted. They forgot that the market dictates what the company must build. When the world told them they wanted touchscreens, they closed their eyes covering their ears and said, "No, you want buttons." In the end, the device that was known for connecting the world failed because its creators refused to connect with reality. The day the keyboard died was not the day Steve Jobs walked onto that stage. It was the day the executives in Waterloo laughed at him. That laughter was the sound of a giant signing its own death warrant. I am Alex, and you have been watching The Untold Path. If you want more hidden history and deeper truth, subscribe to the channel. Your support powers every episode.